Welcome into the San Francisco 49ers Report coming your way on today's show. We're going to take a look at the latest Niners injury news heading into preseason game number 2. And of course, as training camp and the preseason continue to move forward, we also have a new Brock Purdy update as far as his injury goes. This is good news for the Niners starting quarterback. Let's start off with the latest Niners injury news. And the next few players who we're about to talk about are all expected to return to practice at some point this week. Let's begin with Robert Beal, the 5th-round pick, edge rusher out of Georgia. He's been out since the start of training camp. Actually hasn't been able to partake in any practices so far. This is a good development for San Francisco and for him. He does have an opportunity to make this 53-man roster. We've talked about this over the last couple of weeks that opposite of Nick Bosa, the other edge rusher spot is a little bit thin. Drake Jackson is an unknown. Cleveland Ferrell's been a bust up to this point. The depth behind those players is somewhat thin. So Robert Beal Jr., intriguing player with a lot of burst and explosiveness coming off that edge spot. Kalia Davis, on the other hand, was a 2022 6th-round pick. Nobody really thought that he was going to be able to play as a rookie because a couple of years ago, while playing at UCF, he tore his ACL. There was a chance that he was going to be able to return at the end of last year because he did return to practice. He's also been out since the start of training camp. Undisclosed injuries for Davis as well as Beal because those injuries did happen before the start of camp. And when you look at the Niners defensive line depth chart, as far as starters go, and really you can say this for many position groups for San Francisco, they have one of the most talented rosters in the National Football League. But because they're paying top dollar to a lot of players at multiple positions, they can't afford a lot of quality depth pieces. Now, Nick Bosa, Javon Hargrave, Eric Armstead, Drake Jackson, those are all very, very good players. And I love the defensive line and the makeup here. As far as the backups go, Cleveland Ferrell, I like him. Kerry Hyder Jr., though, a little bit longer in the tooth. Alex Barrett has had a pretty good camp. I want to see what Robert Beal Jr. can do. Javon Kinlaw honestly got pushed around against the Las Vegas Raiders. Kevin Givens is really the epitome of the Niners finding these defensive linemen, diamond in the rough, developing them over time. T.Y. McGill, certainly a solid player. The starters here in good shape. The backups, though, some question marks. Now to wide receiver. Danny Gray is still fighting for either playing time or a roster spot, especially given how Chris Conley played against the Raiders. He was one of the lone bright spots against Las Vegas. He's a veteran, so it's easy to see why Trey Lance, Sam Darnold went his way, especially because they've been able to rack up a lot of practice reps with a player like that. Danny Gray has something at that wide receiver spot that a lot of people lack on this team. That's that vertical getaway speed. But injuries and drops have been problems for him. He went into last week's joint practices against the Raiders with a slight adductor hip injury. Kyle Shanahan said he kind of re-aggravated that. He's expected back this week as well. Now to Trey Greenlaw, suffered a hamstring ailment last week. He too expected to return to practice this week. So relatively, the San Francisco 49ers are pretty healthy going into week 1, at least as of right now. Drake Jackson is going to return because he too had a hamstring injury. These soft tissue injuries on the uptick to a certain degree on this Niners roster. At this point of camp, it does happen. That's the reality of football. And then Elijah Mitchell, he missed the last week and a half with that adductor injury. For him, it's more of a concern because 2 years into the NFL, heading into year 3, he's been injured so often, but he's a really special player when he's able to stay on the field. And this battle for RB2 behind Christian McCaffrey, I think it's under-talked about. I think it's underrated. Elijah Mitchell's been injured so much. So when healthy, he's the RB2 on this team. And one of the better RB2s as far as production and skills go across the NFL, but also on this roster. But if he can't stay healthy, who steps up? Ty Davis-Price, he had some good carries against the Raiders. Jordan Mason had some solid moments, but dropped that screen pass, which was a classic Kyle Shanahan draw it up type of play where the shot was there. If J.P. Mason was able to catch that football, there was so much real estate in front of him to pick those yards up, but he dropped it. And really, that was the epitome of how San Francisco played that game against the Raiders. They got punched in the teeth. They didn't look ready to play, and that was an issue. For TDP, has to get better if he wants to see time with picking up the blitz, because he didn't do a good job of that upon rewatching that game against the Raiders on Sunday. You look at this Niners running back depth chart. Christian McCaffrey, he could go for 1,500 to 2,000 all-purpose yards this year as a wide receiver and a back for this team. After that, though, a lot of question marks, of course. George Kittle will not return this week. He is still out with an adductor injury. That's in that groin area. He did do a sit-down interview with NBC Sports Bay Area. This is good because it's not expected to be long-term. And this Niners situation here at the tight end spot, it is in question right now. You know that George Kittle is still an all-pro and the best all-around tight end in the National Football League because of his ability to catch the ball but also block, and he's used as a blocking option in this offense so often because he thrives in that area. But who's going to be the backup tight end? Ross Dwelly did catch that touchdown pass on Sunday after the deflection on that should have been Trey Lance interception. But Ross Dwelly and Charlie Warner are two veterans who just don't really move the needle. Now, San Francisco spent a third-round pick on Cam Latu. He's had an atrocious training camp. He's dropped a lot of passes. Then he actually made a nice catch against the Raiders, then coughed the football up and put the ball on the ground. It's really just been a summary of what his camp has been up to this point, and they drafted him in the third round. He's been a bust up to this point. I understand it's early, but there's a lot of work for him to do. Braden Willis, on the other hand, was drafted in the 6th round out of Oklahoma. He offers more special teams ability. He offers better tackle breaking ability, and he's been the better player. But because he was a 6th round pick, is he going to lose that roster spot to Cam Latu just because of where he was drafted? And then you have Troy Fumagalli, who on tape may have been the second best tight end for San Francisco during Sunday's game after George Kittle, but because he's been a journeyman for a really long time, is he on the outside looking in? I honestly thought he had a couple of good moments for San Francisco, so the tight end 2, tight end 3 battle, and if the Niners want to hold 4 tight ends on this 53-man roster, is certainly an interesting roster battle for San Francisco. These players are hoped back for week 1. The expectation and the hope is that these players are going to return against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'd say Ray McCloud is doubtful. He suffered a fractured wrist last Tuesday. From that point on, expected to be out about 8 weeks. Now, he said to Kyle Shanahan, I will be back. I'm going to do everything I can to be back. I'd find that to be a big surprise if he's back for week 1 just because of the severity of that injury. But a couple of special teams aces here. George Odom, a former All-Pro special teams player, an SC joint sprain in his shoulder. He's expected to be back week 1. And then Oren Burks with a PCL sprain. Before we continue to move forward on the show, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We're closing in on 83,000 subscribers. And if you want injury news, daily updates, news, rumors, analysis, breaking news, watch parties, live shows. We do it all here on the San Francisco 49ers Report. Help us get to 83,000 subs and hit that sub button right now. A programming reminder as well, watch party number 2 of the preseason is coming your way on Saturday right here on the show. The Niners will host the Denver Broncos. Our coverage will begin 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 for those of you on the West Coast. And if you want to bet on this game, no better sportsbook to do it than our sportsbook partner, BetUS. They are offering a 125% deposit bonus. All you have to do, use that link down below. Chatsports.com/49bet, promo code Niners125. What that means is you put in $100 into your account, you get $125 back. That's $225 to game with. The Denver Broncos, 4.5-point favorites or so. The over-under set at 39. Chatsports.com/49bet, promo code Niners125. We round out this particular segment with the latest on Brock Purdy here. So going into camp, he was cleared without restrictions, but then the 49ers implemented limitations for him to start camp. They didn't want him throwing and practicing 3 days in a row. But starting this week, according to head coach Kyle Shanahan, Purdy will not be on a pitch count any longer. So now he is fully cleared for the Niners. That's obviously good news. He's this team's starting quarterback, and he has to start to ramp it up physically a little bit with the regular season less than a month away. The direct quote from Shanahan, those limitations, they are off, so he'll get to go 3 practices in a row this week. That started with a practice on Tuesday. San Francisco will practice on Wednesday and Thursday, off day Friday, and then they're back in action preseason game number 2 against the Denver Broncos on Saturday. As of this recording on Tuesday afternoon, not sure if Purdy is going to start yet, but we will continue to, of course, monitor that situation. Going into Tuesday, Purdy had practiced as a full participant 11 of 14 days, and I'm pretty amazed at how quickly he's come along. This wasn't a full Tommy John restructure to his elbow. It was a repair. Either way, though, this was a partial repair to the ulnar collateral ligament in his elbow, and it happened on March 10th. That's when he underwent that UCL repair surgery. He started throwing a football a couple of months later, May 29th. On July 25th, he was cleared to start training camp, and then the regular season opener coming your way on September 10th. Of course, a watch party for that game as well, right here on the San Francisco 49ers Report. Now, why Brock Purdy has separated himself from Trey Lance. And again, this isn't a dig at Trey Lance. This is just my honest evaluation, and if you disagree with it, I disagree with you. Why Brock Purdy is beating out Trey Lance to be the team's starting quarterback. He processes the game faster. And we saw that against the Raiders on Sunday, where Trey Lance processed slow. And as part of that, that's why he took a couple of those sacks, because he didn't know where to go with the football, was very unsure of himself. Now, Trey Lance, with those new mechanics, does get rid of the ball a little bit quicker, but Brock Purdy gets rid of the ball faster. And that is really important to do in Kyle Shanahan's offense, because it's just part of the scheme, and it's the backbone of Kyle Shanahan's system. And speaking of Purdy running the system, he just seems to run it a little bit better as compared to Trey Lance. I'm not sure if Trey Lance is a system fit, and that's why I floated out the idea of the Niners maybe dangling Trey Lance out there as a trade candidate, because I'm not sure he fits in this system. Guys like Jimmy Garoppolo, Nick Mullins, C.J. Beathard, Brock Purdy, they've been able to master it really quickly. It's taken Trey Lance a long time. And Brandon Allen had this quote after the Raiders preseason game where he said, Kyle Shanahan, this is a very quarterback-friendly system, something along those lines. I'm not saying this verbatim, but Kyle Shanahan's system, it's built for a quarterback who can get the ball out quickly and accurately. Trey Lance has struggled to get the ball out fast and accurately. That's why I question the scheme fit here. And with Purdy last year, in those games that he played, going 7-0 up until losing in the NFC Championship game, and I do kind of give him credit for that Dolphins victory because he came in when the Niners were down in replacing Jimmy Garoppolo. He's been accurate. And as part of this system, when Kyle Shanahan schemes these guys wide open and they're running free, you have to be able to hit those receivers in stride so that they don't break their momentum, because if you have to turn around for a ball, it halts your momentum and picking up yards after the catch. And when you're scheming guys wide open, some of those explosive plays come when you hit your receivers in stride. Purdy did that at a really, really good level last year. And look, I think the experience at Iowa State for Purdy has certainly helped him as compared to hurting Trey Lance. Trey Lance seems to be so inexperienced, so raw. The one thing that he needs clearly is consistent reps. I'm just not sure if he's going to get that with San Francisco ever. And Purdy played so much at Iowa State. I thought it was also pretty telling how when Purdy left Iowa State, they were really bad last year. When Purdy was there, they were consistently competitive when they didn't really have a competitive edge against a lot of teams in the Big 12. This quote from Kyle Shanahan on Brock Purdy, by the way, took about 3 games last year for Shanahan to see that Brock Purdy was the guy. San Francisco continues to double down and triple down on Purdy being their quarterback. And here's a quote from Shanahan from an article in this Albert Breer column. He's been the starter since last year ended. He was always clearly our starter, but there were so many questions about his injury, how he'd come back from it, that we didn't even know if he'd be ready for this year. So we had to prepare for everything else. Those guys have been competing their butts off, and I feel great playing with those guys. But like I told them, like I've said to the media, like I said to everyone since day one, based on what Brock did on tape last year, it's hard to beat that out in practice. And that's why I've said Brock Purdy has earned the right to be this team's starting quarterback. Now, if he struggles the first month of the season and San Francisco gets out of the gate slow and he continues to throw interceptions in the regular season like he's thrown in practice, in training camp, that becomes a little bit of a concern. But at the very least, to start this year, Purdy has earned the right to be this team's starter. Your level of confidence in Brock Purdy on a meter of 1 to 100 going into 2023 is what? As always, we appreciate your feedback here in the show, so make sure you go on down and let us know in the comment section.